I was never one for grand gestures, but this dream, it was something more than just an idea. It was a whisper from the past, a call to bring together the pieces of my life that felt so scattered since Arthur was gone. I was 71, and the years had slowly crept by with fewer surprises, fewer joys. But I had one wish left, one last dream that still burned brightly in my chest. A family cruise. I remember the day I first saw the brochures, the soft, shiny pages filled with images of white sandy beaches, turquoise waters, and happy families together. I sat in my favorite armchair by the window, the sun filtering through the lace curtains as I flipped through each page, imagining how wonderful it would be. The idea of us all, Jonathan, his wife Sabrina, the kids, Maya and Leo, all together on a ship, laughing and sharing stories, made my heart feel light again. After Arthur died, I didn't have much left to look forward to. The house felt too quiet, too empty, and my friends, well, they had their own lives. But this was something I could offer. A last great adventure for the family we had built together. It wasn't just about the cruise, not really. It was about being together one more time, about leaving a legacy of memories for the ones I loved. I had saved up for it, you see. Not much, but enough. Enough for a cruise through the warm, sun-drenched Caribbean, a 7-day escape. A chance for all of us to forget our burdens and just be a family again. When I showed the brochures to Jonathan, I saw that old spark in his eyes, the one I hadn't seen in so long. "Wow, Mom, that sounds amazing," he said, his voice filled with excitement. For a brief moment, I felt like his mother again, the woman who could make his world brighter. But then there was Sabrina. She looked at the brochures and gave a tight smile. "Well, it's a lovely idea, Cora, but I think we need to look at the details more closely," she said, her voice polite, but with that sharpness I knew all too well. The right cruise line matters. You don't want something too basic, especially for your age. Her words stung more than I cared to admit, but I tried to ignore the growing knot in my stomach. "I thought we could all just have fun together," I said, my voice softer than usual. "We could relax, enjoy the sun." "Oh, yes, of course," she interrupted, her smile fading as she casually checked her phone, a habit of hers whenever the conversation drifted into uncomfortable territory. "But, I just wonder if it's the best fit for you, Cora. All those activities, excursions. It might be a lot for someone your age. You wouldn't want to be stuck on the boat, right?" I could feel the disappointment rising in my chest, threatening to suffocate me, but I held on, trying to focus on the dream, the hope that still flickered inside me. "It doesn't have to be so busy. We can just enjoy the peace, the togetherness." But deep down, I knew what she was saying. I was too old, too much of a burden, a weak link in the grand plan. I tried to smile through it, but I could already see the way they were distancing themselves from me. Jonathan, who had once been so full of life and affection, now seemed only half present, his attention slipping from me to Sabrina's every word. I pushed the brochures away, trying to act as if it didn't matter. "I'll just look for a different option then," I said, my voice softer than I meant it to be. Later that evening, I sat by the window again, the brochures still resting on the table beside me. I thought of my family, of their smiles, of the laughter we could share. It wasn't about the cruise, not really. It was about the memory of love, of being together. I had wanted to give them something that would last, something that would show them how much I cared. but with every passing moment, I could feel them slipping further away from me. As I looked out at the quiet street, I realized something. That dream, that last hope of being with my family, was slowly slipping away too. I had tried so hard to bring them together, but it was clear that for them, the cruise was just another thing they didn't need. Maybe I was too much. Maybe I was a burden. But in that moment, I also felt a quiet, aching resolve. I wasn't ready to let go of this dream just yet, not until I had tried, not until I had given them the opportunity to choose me. But I knew, deep down, they had already made their decision, and what I didn't know at the time was that this would be the beginning of something much darker, a betrayal that would cut deeper than I could ever have imagined. I remember the moment I began to feel it, deep in my chest, the thing I'd tried so hard to ignore. I didn't want to believe it, but the truth started creeping in, like a slow tide, washing away my hopes. My dream, the one I had held so close to my heart for so long, was beginning to slip through my fingers. Every time I asked Jonathan about the cruise, he'd reply with the same vague answer. "We're still looking for the best options, Mom." But something was wrong. It wasn't just the hesitation in his voice. It was the subtle shift in the way they acted, the way they started to avoid talking about it altogether. That Sunday afternoon, they came to visit, and I'd made my famous lemon meringue pie, the one Jonathan always loved. But this time, he barely touched it. He didn't even smile when I placed the pie in front of him, and I could tell he wasn't really there, not the way he used to be. Sabrina, well, she never even bothered to try a piece. "Mom, we looked at the prices," Jonathan said. His eyes not meeting mine. His voice was clipped, businesslike. He wasn't talking to me anymore. He was talking to Sabrina, seeking her approval, her confirmation. "It's just too expensive for us right now." I could hear it in his voice. He didn't even need to finish the sentence. It wasn't just about money. It was about something deeper, something colder. They weren't planning the trip for me. They had never planned to. Sabrina sat there, her eyes cold and distant, her fingers wrapped tightly around her phone. She slid her hand across the table to pat mine, her touch more mechanical than warm. "Cora, you know, a cruise like that isn't really the best option for you," she said, her voice soft, but laced with a sort of condescending concern. "I mean, you wouldn't want to be sitting on the ship all day while the rest of us are out exploring, would you? The walking, the heat, it's a lot, and we wouldn't want you to feel uncomfortable." Her words felt like a slap, each one heavier than the last. It wasn't just that they were postponing the trip. It was the way they dismissed me, as if my desire to be part of their lives was a burden, an inconvenience. She smiled sweetly, but there was no kindness in it, just an icy form of politeness that made my insides twist. I stayed silent. I didn't argue. I didn't fight it. What was the point? Every word from Jonathan was backed by Sabrina's steely presence. I wasn't even part of their conversation anymore. The woman who had raised him, who had given him everything, was now just a spectator in their lives, a background figure, an old woman they no longer had use for. That night, after they left, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The pie was still there, barely touched. My heart ached in a way I hadn't felt before, and I couldn't bring myself to eat a single bite. I pulled out my phone, my fingers shaking as I began to write a message to Jonathan. "I understand, son. Don't worry about the cruise. I won't bother you about it anymore. Take care of yourselves. Remember your mom." I sent the message and sat back, my chest heavy with sorrow. I knew I was fooling myself. I was letting them off the hook, but I couldn't bear the thought of losing them completely, even if it meant swallowing my pain and pretending everything was fine. The next few days passed slowly. I tried to fill the emptiness with small tasks, watering my plants, organizing old photographs, reading. I tried not to think about how my dream was fading, but it gnawed at me, always there, tugging at my heart. Then I received another message from Jonathan. This one was short, just a few lines. "Mom, we've decided to postpone the cruise again. There are too many financial pressures right now. Maybe next year. We'll keep you updated." The words stung. I wanted to scream, but instead I just stared at the screen, feeling something inside me crack. Maybe next year. It wasn't just the delay, it was the way he said it, like he had already written me out of the picture. I felt a deep, gut-wrenching sadness. They had no intention of ever taking me on that cruise. I was just a pawn in their game, a source of funds to be used when it suited them. I spent the rest of that evening alone, sitting by the window, looking out at the quiet street. I couldn't stop thinking about how they had used me, how my trust had been taken for granted. I felt like a fool. How had I allowed them to manipulate me so easily? How had I allowed myself to believe that they cared enough to make my dream a reality? But the truth was now clear. They never cared about the trip. They only cared about themselves. Sabrina's desire for a perfect image, Jonathan's need for approval from his wife, it had all led to this. I was nothing more than a tool for them to achieve their own goals. And yet I stayed silent, not wanting to stir things up, not wanting to admit how deeply they had hurt me. But deep down, I knew I couldn't stay quiet forever. Something inside me began to shift. A quiet rage, slow and steady, started to build. I had been passive for so long, letting them walk all over me, letting them use me. But I wasn't going to let it happen anymore. They had taken my dream, my trust, my love, and they had used it to get what they wanted. They thought I was just an old woman, too weak, too naive to understand what was happening. But they were wrong. I had spent too many years in this world to be fooled any longer, and soon they would realize just how much I had learned. I sat there, the phone trembling in my hands as I stared at the message Maya had sent. The bright turquoise of the ocean, the soft white sand, the carefree smiles of my grandchildren. My little Maya, her face sun-kissed, holding the camera high as if she were sending me a piece of paradise. "Grandma, we're in the Caribbean. Wish you were here with us. The water's as warm as a bathtub. Love you," Heart it read. For a moment, I thought it was an old photo. Maybe she was just sharing a memory, something from a previous summer. But then came the next message. "Dad said you couldn't make it because you're not feeling well. Hope you feel better soon." It hit me like a cold wave, that sickening feeling of realization. The Caribbean, my family, on vacation without me, and they hadn't even bothered to tell me. Not a word. I wasn't even included in the plan. They hadn't wanted me there, not even as a passing thought, let alone as part of their holiday. I blinked, rereading the message several times, hoping it was just a misunderstanding, that I had gotten it all wrong. But no, the truth was clear. They had taken the trip. They had gone on the cruise without me. And they had used my money to fund it, my credit card, which I had entrusted them with for emergencies, to pay for their luxury vacation. I felt my heart clench in disbelief, my chest tightening. They had lied to me. They had used my trust to make their escape. I sat in stunned silence, as though the room had been sucked dry of all sound. The only thing that remained was the gnawing, burning ache in my chest. I didn't even hesitate. I stood up, my legs shaking, as I walked to my desk and turned on my laptop. I pulled up the banking app, my fingers shaking so badly I had to enter my password 3 times before I could get in. I checked the recent transactions, my heart pounding in my ears. And there it was, clear as day. A charge for Royal Caribbean cruises for 4 passengers. 4, not 5. A large sum, nearly all the money I had saved for the last years of my life. My breath caught in my throat as I scrolled down. There were more charges, several purchases from the ship, excursions, onboard purchases, luxury gifts at shops that cost more than my entire monthly pension. The dates on the charges matched perfectly with the time my family was supposed to be on the cruise. But they had hidden the truth from me. They had used my money without even asking, without telling me. I couldn't breathe. The betrayal was too much to bear. They had taken everything I had, my trust, my love, my financial security, and turned it into their playground. All while they were out enjoying their extravagant vacation, I was here alone in my quiet house, completely unaware. They thought I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't understand. They believed I was just an old woman, too naive to catch on. But they had underestimated me. The pain was overwhelming, but with it came something else, a sharp clarity. I wasn't just heartbroken. I was angry, furious. How could they? How dare they take advantage of me like this? My son, my flesh and blood, had stolen from me. And Sabrina, that woman who had never once treated me with the respect I deserved, had used my generosity as a weapon to satisfy her own desires. I sat back, my hands trembling, staring at the screen, feeling a deep cold spread through my veins. The truth had settled like a stone in my stomach, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. This was not just about a broken dream, a missed vacation. It was about my dignity. My family had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And I realized then I couldn't just sit here and let them get away with it. They had taken my money, my dream, and my love. And now I had to take back what was mine. I couldn't let this stand. I had been passive for far too long, letting them manipulate me, letting them lie to me. But not anymore. The feeling of injustice burned through me. I was no longer just the quiet, ignored mother, the old woman with no voice. I was someone who had been wronged, and I would make sure they knew it. They thought they could leave me behind, that they could take advantage of me and never face the consequences. But they were wrong. I would not be their pawn anymore. I would make sure they knew what it felt like to lose everything they had taken for granted. And so, with trembling hands, I began to make a plan. I sat in my favorite armchair, a warm cup of tea resting gently in my hands, gazing out at the autumn sky. The first emotional reaction to their betrayal had been raw: pain, disappointment, anger. But as the days passed, I realized something. Emotions were not my weapon. I wasn't the frail, helpless woman they thought I was. I had the power to make them pay in a way they never imagined. I had the opportunity to become the reckoning they deserved. My credit card was my power. They knew it. They thought I was just a sweet old woman who wouldn't have the faintest idea of how to track my money. They assumed I wouldn't notice the lavish purchases, the lies they fed me. They were wrong. I had spent the last few days not wallowing in my sorrow, but plotting, planning, calculating every move with a cold, calculated precision. I wasn't going to act out of anger. No, I was going to be a strategist, a tactician, moving one step at a time, playing the long game. I reached for my tablet. The screen lit up as I opened the banking app. It was simple, really. All I needed to do was freeze the card, document all the unauthorized transactions, and wait. I wasn't going to rush. They were already enjoying their vacation. But little did they know I was in control of their fate now. I meticulously went through every transaction. The Royal Caribbean cruise charges for 4 passengers, not 5. The exorbitant onboard spending at the shops, the excursions, the spa treatments, the cocktails. Each dollar spent was another betrayal, another knife wound to my trust. I felt a strange satisfaction with each charge I recorded. They had thought they could escape my reach, but now they were trapped. I was no longer just the old woman they could ignore. I was the one pulling the strings. They had used me for their comfort, their pleasure. Now it was my turn to make them feel the consequences of their arrogance. I checked the itinerary for their cruise again. The last 2 days were key. Those would be the longest days for them, stuck out at sea with no way to reach anyone for help. No access to ATMs, no way to fix the mess they had made. Those 2 days would be their reckoning. I called the bank, keeping my voice steady and composed. I need to report fraudulent activity on my credit card, I said, as though this were just another routine transaction. The operator on the other end confirmed the actions would be frozen. The money they had spent, the lies they'd told, they would come crashing down, but only when they least expected it. I wasn't in a hurry. They were far from their home, enjoying themselves on the ship, unaware of what was waiting for them. But soon they would be forced to face it. It was a slow burn, building like the final moments before a storm. My hands trembled slightly as I wrote down all the details, documenting the lies, the deceit, the exact dates of the transactions. I knew the truth would come out, but I wanted it to be undeniable. I was patient. I had learned to be patient over the years, and now I was letting time work in my favor. I could already picture it. Sabrina trying to buy something extravagant at one of the ship's boutique stores, her perfect, glossy demeanor slipping when the clerk tells her that the card is declined. Jonathan trying to buy a round of drinks at the bar, only for the bartender to inform him that the card is no longer working. It was the moment they would realize that everything they had relied on had slipped from their grasp. I had no doubt that they would try to use their own cards, but after their indulgent spending, they would be left with nothing. The luxury they were enjoying would quickly become a gilded cage, and they would have no way out. I checked the clock, confirming the final leg of their cruise. It was the perfect time. I wasn't going to act impulsively. I would wait. They would have no idea that their paradise was about to turn into a nightmare of their own making. I wasn't going to be there physically, but I would be the silent architect of their downfall. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what was coming settle on my shoulders. I was no longer a woman cast aside, waiting for her children's attention. I was the one in control, the one who would make them pay for their betrayal. And when they finally reached out, when they needed help, help that they had long since denied me, I would be ready. The final blow would come when they least expected it, and when it did, they would realize that they had underestimated me. This would be my triumph, my final act of reclaiming what was mine, my dignity, my respect, and the justice I had long been denied. The game had begun, and I was in control. It was exactly as I had imagined it, my family, in the bright tropical sun, laughing and sipping cocktails on the deck of their cruise ship, completely oblivious. Meanwhile, I sat here in my quiet home, alone with my thoughts, but brimming with the cold satisfaction of knowing that soon their perfect vacation would unravel. I had planned every step with precision. The pieces had fallen into place. The time had come for them to face the consequences of their actions. I lifted the phone, my fingers steady as I dialed the bank. "Good afternoon. I need to freeze my card," I said, my voice calm and composed. The operator's voice came through, asking for a reason. I responded with just the right amount of detachment. "I've noticed suspicious activity on my account." My eyes never left the tablet in front of me, where I had been tracking their every move, every charge, every purchase. I could feel a small but insistent smile tugging at the corner of my lips. They thought I was unaware, that I wouldn't catch on. They were wrong. I didn't need the traditional kind of revenge. No loud confrontations, no tears, no scene. All I needed was control. I didn't need to yell or scream. I simply needed them to realize, in their own time, how badly they had miscalculated. The operator on the other end confirmed that the freeze had been placed on the card. I sat back, feeling a calm settle over me. The card was now useless. I knew, with certainty, that they would figure it out soon enough. I could almost picture it. Jonathan and Sabrina lounging by the pool, cocktails in hand, their laughter filling the air, the sun shining down. And then, in the next moment, the smooth flow of their perfect day would be interrupted. The reality would hit them in the most unceremonious way. The card wouldn't work. They would be faced with a sudden shock, a cold dose of reality that they were no longer in control. I imagined Sabrina's face first, her confusion turning to irritation. She would try to swipe it again, trying to convince herself that the system had just made a mistake. Jonathan would likely pull out his phone immediately, calling me with that urgent, familiar tone, the one he used when he was trying to salvage something, trying to fix it before it unraveled completely. But there would be no fixing it, not this time. I knew that as soon as they realized they couldn't pay for anything, no more cocktails, no more shopping, no more extravagant indulgences, panic would set in. Sabrina would try to save face, pretending it was all a mistake. Jonathan, on the other hand, would be calling me, no doubt with an apology ready on his lips, offering every excuse under the sun. But I wasn't going to listen to them. I wasn't going to let them talk their way out of this one. They would never know that I had been waiting for this moment, watching them, studying their every move, tracking their every expense. They had underestimated me. They had assumed I was just some old woman who could be pushed aside, who would never figure out what they had done. They didn't know that I had been paying attention to every detail. And now, in their moment of maximum enjoyment, they would face the consequences of their arrogance. This wasn't about hurting them. It was about reclaiming my power. They had made me feel small, insignificant, and forgotten. Now I was the one in control, and they were the ones left scrambling with nowhere to turn. The fear and confusion I would witness from them, it would be the culmination of their mistake, their underestimation of me. They thought they could take advantage of me, and I had let them. But now it was my turn. They would learn that I was not someone to be dismissed. I was not just their old mother, their grandmother to be disregarded. I was the one who would decide how this story would end. As I sat in my quiet home, watching the sunset outside, a sense of deep satisfaction filled me. The storm was coming, and they didn't even know it. They were out there, thinking everything was perfect, unaware that their paradise was about to crumble. The moment had arrived, and I was ready. I sat in my favorite chair, a cup of tea in my hands, my eyes fixed on the tablet screen. I didn't care what was happening on the ship. I didn't care about their endless cocktails or their indulgent excursions. I knew one thing: they were powerless now, and soon enough everything would come to light. My heart quickened as a call from Jonathan appeared on the screen. I had been waiting for this. This was the moment I had prepared for, the call that would reveal everything. "Mom." His voice was tight, strained with panic. "What happened? Why is the card not working? We can't buy anything. We can't even pay for the excursions." I heard his desperation, and faintly in the background I could make out Sabrina's voice, trying to calm the situation. But I knew without a doubt, that they were trapped. This was their punishment, and I was completely calm. "What happened?" I asked, my voice steady and unwavering, as if I were speaking from another world. "You spent my money without permission, son. These are just the consequences of your lies." The silence on the other end was deafening. I could hear Jonathan's breath catch as he scrambled for an excuse. Sabrina, ever the manipulator, tried to interject, her voice as smooth and false as ever. "We just wanted it to be convenient for everyone, you said yourself." "This isn't about convenience," I interrupted coldly. "This is theft. You used my trust, and now you must face the consequences." Their calm facade began to crack. Jonathan stammered, his voice laced with frustration. "Mom, we were going to pay you back. We didn't mean for this to happen. It was just easier to use your card for the points." I could hear the panic creeping in, the crack in his voice revealing how much they had relied on the illusion of security that came with my generosity. Sabrina was quieter now, her usual attempts at manipulation falling flat. The once confident, self-assured couple was now reduced to empty words, scrambling for a way out. I didn't feel any satisfaction in hearing their fear. It wasn't about watching them squirm, not for me. It was about showing them the harsh reality of their actions. They had taken advantage of me, thought they could use me as their financial safety net, and now they were facing the consequences. "You thought I wouldn't notice," I said, my voice as sharp as a blade, "but I knew exactly what you were doing, and now you're going to have to deal with it. You're on your own. I'm not helping you get out of this." I could practically hear the wheels turning in Jonathan's head, the excuses, the justifications, the plea for help. It would all come, but there would be no mercy from me. They had burned that bridge long ago. They were too comfortable in their privilege, too certain that they could use me and walk away without a second thought. As they tried to regain some semblance of control, I remained calm, cool, and collected. I knew that I was in control of this situation. They had underestimated me, thought I was weak, old, and easy to manipulate. Now, they were the ones trapped, the ones who had no idea how to get out of the mess they had created. I imagined the scene on the cruise. Jonathan, face flushed with embarrassment and panic, trying to call every possible number, his fingers trembling as he searched for someone, anyone, to help him. Sabrina, no longer able to wear her perfect mask, fidgeting nervously, trying to save face in front of the other passengers. They would have to deal with this on their own. No more pretending, no more lies. The panic in their voices was already beginning to seep through, and I felt a strange satisfaction in that. They were finally facing the reality of their betrayal. And though they could try to explain themselves, they knew, deep down, that they had lost. It was too late for apologies, too late for excuses. I had already won. From my quiet home, I could only imagine the chaos unfolding on their end. Jonathan and Sabrina would make calls to the bank, to friends, to family, anyone who could help them. But it was already too late. They would have to figure it out themselves. There would be no more room for manipulation or deceit. Now, they had to confront the consequences of their own actions. And as I watched the screen, feeling their panic reverberate in my chest, I knew one thing. This was the moment when I took back everything they had tried to strip from me. My dignity, my respect, my control. I had waited for this moment. I had planned it carefully. And now it was my turn to be the one in control. This was the last lesson they would ever forget. I knew this moment would come. It was only a matter of time. They had thought I would pity them, that I would be afraid to sever the ties, to end things between us. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Now, I held the situation in my hands. The call from Jonathan came just as I had expected. His name flashed on the screen, but I didn't rush to answer. I waited, knowing he was about to say what he should have said long ago. Mom, we're on the ship and everything's falling apart. We can't buy anything, even water. Everything's blocked. You have to help us. It's an emergency." His voice was strained, full of panic. I could hear the fear trembling in his words. I didn't rush to reply. I listened to him, feeling his helplessness, seeing how his confidence was crumbling as he realized that nothing he relied on would work now. "I can't help you, Jonathan," I answered, my tone calm, even soft, but there was no room for excuses in my words. "This happened because you broke my trust, and now you have to face the consequences of your actions." I felt his voice falter, the weight of the reality settling in. He tried again, desperation creeping into his voice. "But Mom, we're your kids. How can you do this to us?" He said it with guilt, with words that tried to manipulate my feelings. But I wasn't moved. I cut him off, my words sharp, cutting through the air. "You're not children anymore. You're adults. And now you need to realize that trust has a price." For a few more minutes they tried to apologize, to beg for help. But I knew nothing would change the situation now. I didn't want to feel their pain. I didn't want to sympathize. I couldn't be the woman who fixed everything they had broken. They needed to understand that mistakes had consequences. Finally, I said, "This is your mistake. And now you figure out how to fix it. I can't help you. You need to answer for your actions." And with that, I hung up the phone. I didn't feel joy or triumph, just calm, a quiet, steady peace. It was the peace of someone who had finally stood their ground, who refused to let anyone manipulate them again.